They said I didn't belong. What they never expected was that one day, I'd become the queen of their world. My name is Madison Hale, and for most of my life, I was the outsider. The one people whispered about when they thought I couldn't hear. The one who always had to fight twice as hard just to be noticed. And standing at the heart of it all was her, Savannah Brooks. Savannah wasn't just my rival, she was the golden girl. Born into wealth, polished in every way, the kind of woman who never had to prove herself because the world already bent to her will. We met in our first year at Whitmore International, a prestigious marketing firm in New York City. For me, landing that job had been the result of sleepless nights, scholarships, and sheer determination. For Savannah, it was simply another stepping stone on her family's carefully paved road. At first, I thought we could be allies. We worked in the same division, both ambitious, both aiming to climb the corporate ladder. I even admired her confidence, how she seemed to own every room she entered. But admiration quickly turned to suspicion. Savannah had a way of cutting me down with a smile. In meetings, she'd interrupt me, rephrasing my ideas as if they were hers. At office dinners, she'd joke about my humble background in front of executives, her laughter ringing sweet but sharp. And the worst part? Everyone seemed to buy it. They laughed with her, nodded with her, treated her as if she was destined for greatness and I was merely a guest who had slipped in through the wrong door. "You just don't fit the culture here, Madison," she once whispered after a presentation. "You try too hard. People can sense it." Those words burrowed deep into me, festering like poison. But I didn't leave. I couldn't. Because beneath all the humiliation, all the exclusion, I carried a fire Savannah could never understand. I didn't come from money, or privilege, or family connections. I came from grit. From nights waiting tables to pay tuition. From clawing my way through every rejection letter until one door finally opened. I wasn't about to let Savannah, or anyone else, close it on me again. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Each day felt heavier. Each meeting colder. It was as if Savannah's shadow stretched longer with every passing week, pulling me closer to the edge of invisibility. But shadows don't scare me. Because here's what Savannah never realized: you can only push someone down for so long before they rise up stronger than you ever imagined. And the day would come, sooner than she thought, when the girl who didn't belong would stand at the center of it all. The only question was, how far would I have to go to take back my place? At first, I told myself Savannah was just competitive. That maybe I was reading too much into the smirks, the interruptions, the way her compliments always came wrapped in barbed wire. But the longer I worked at Whitmore International, the harder it became to ignore the cracks forming around me. It started small. In team meetings, I'd hand in detailed reports, carefully researched and cross-checked. But when the final presentation was shown to the executives, my name was mysteriously missing from the credits. Savannah's wasn't. She stood there, smiling, receiving praise for work she hadn't done, while my contribution was erased like chalk washed from a board. Then came the favoritism. The department head, Mr. Lang, seemed to hang on Savannah's every word. When she made mistakes, and she did, more often than anyone realized, he brushed them off as learning experiences. But if I so much as misaligned a chart or missed an email, his disapproval was sharp and public. Savannah would shoot me a look across the room, as if to say, "See? You'll never measure up." The whispers didn't help either. Colleagues who once chatted with me over coffee now avoided eye contact. More than once, I overheard fragments of conversations about how I was difficult to work with, or always defensive, or a little out of place. Words I had never given them reason to say. Words I knew Savannah was planting like poison seeds. The emotional toll crept in quietly, like water seeping through cracks in a foundation. I stopped speaking up in meetings, afraid my ideas would only be stolen or dismissed. Nights at home became endless loops of second-guessing, Was I imagining it all? Was I truly the problem? Or was I simply losing a game I never stood a chance in? One evening, while staying late to finish a project, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. I passed by the copy room and saw Savannah inside, flipping through a stack of papers. They were mine, drafts I had been working on, drafts that hadn't even been submitted yet. She didn't see me at first. She snapped pictures with her phone, page by page, moving quickly. My heart pounded. I stepped back before she noticed me, the weight of what I'd seen pressing down like a stone. She wasn't just competing. She was preparing something. When Savannah finally walked out, she wore that same flawless smile she always did, her eyes sparkling as if nothing was wrong. She brushed past me, perfume trailing, and said sweetly, "Working late again, Madison? You should take better care of yourself." The words felt like a warning, sharp and deliberate. That night, as I left the office, the city lights blurred through my tears. I couldn't shake the image of her in the copy room, stealing pieces of me. Something was coming, I could feel it. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for the storm, should have trusted my instincts the moment I saw Savannah snapping photos of my drafts. But I wanted to believe I was wrong, that maybe paranoia was twisting the truth. I told myself she couldn't possibly go that far. I was wrong. The quarterly client showcase was the kind of event that could define a career. I had spent weeks pouring everything I had into the campaign, late nights, skipped meals, obsessing over every detail until it was perfect. This was supposed to be my moment, the proof that I belonged at Whitmore. But when the lights dimmed and the first slide appeared on the massive screen, my stomach dropped. It was my campaign. My data, my visuals, my words. But the name on the title slide wasn't mine. It was Savannah's. I sat frozen as she took the stage, radiant and confident, delivering my presentation as if she had breathed life into it herself. She didn't stumble. She didn't even blink. Every idea I had nurtured was now pouring from her lips, smooth and polished, wrapped in that smile that made people believe she was untouchable. And the audience believed her. The clients leaned forward, impressed. Executives nodded with approval. Applause filled the air when she finished, loud and thunderous. Applause that should have been mine. When the CEO stepped up to the podium, his words felt like daggers. "Brilliant work, Savannah. This campaign will put Whitmore on the map. And for that, we're promoting you to lead strategist." The room erupted in cheers. My ears rang. My chest tightened. Lead strategist, the position I had been silently fighting for, the role I had built this campaign to earn. Gone. Stolen in plain sight. Savannah's eyes met mine across the crowd. She smiled. Not the charming smile she gave the world, but a secret one, sharp, triumphant, mocking. The message was clear: you don't belong. You never will. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Colleagues congratulated her, showered her with praise, while I slipped out unnoticed. By the time I stumbled back into my apartment, my legs gave out beneath me. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking. Shock. Anger. Heartbreak. Disbelief. The emotions collided inside me like a storm with no center. I replayed every late night, every sacrifice, every ounce of myself I had poured into that project, only to watch her steal it all with a smile. Tears burned down my face, but beneath them something darker stirred. Something fierce. Savannah had taken everything from me, my work, my reputation, my future. But she had underestimated one thing. I was done being the girl who didn't belong. And the next move would be mine. For 2 days, I barely left my apartment. I curled up on the couch, numb, the curtains drawn tight against the sunlight. Savannah's triumphant smile haunted me every time I closed my eyes. Every cheer, every clap of approval, replayed in my mind like a cruel reminder of my insignificance. I told myself I didn't belong. That's what she wanted me to believe. Maybe she was right. But on the third night, everything changed. I went to the corner cafe, desperate for air that didn't taste like failure. That's when I heard her. Savannah, sitting at a table near the window with a few coworkers, laughing too loudly, wine glass in hand. I mean, honestly, she said, swirling her drink, Madison handed me her ideas on a silver platter. Poor thing really thought she had a shot. But let's be real, she never belonged here. She's not polished enough, not sharp enough. People like her? They'll always stay in the background. The group erupted in laughter. My blood turned to ice. I wanted to storm over, scream at her, tell everyone the truth. But I froze, gripping the strap of my bag until my knuckles went white. My heart pounded, my throat burned, but I stayed hidden in the corner. And then it hit me. Savannah wasn't smarter than me. She wasn't more talented. She was just ruthless, and I had let her weaponize my trust against me. I left the cafe without her ever knowing I was there. But by the time I stepped back into the night air, something inside me had shifted. The grief that had been suffocating me hardened into resolve. My tears dried into fire. I realized that I didn't need to shout the truth in that moment. I didn't need to beg anyone to believe me. What I needed was proof. Proof of who Savannah really was. Over the next few days, I straightened my posture, forced myself out of bed, and began to think with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I revisited my old notes, my drafts, the email threads where I had shared ideas with her. Every scrap of evidence I had suddenly felt like a weapon I hadn't realized was in my arsenal. Savannah thought she had buried me, but all she had done was awaken a version of me I didn't know existed, stronger, sharper, dangerous. I stood before the mirror one night, my reflection pale but my eyes burning with purpose. For the first time in my life, I saw not a girl begging to belong, but a woman who would take back what was stolen. Quietly, firmly, I whispered to myself, this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Revenge isn't a feverish impulse. It's inventory, what you have, what you need, and how you'll use it. I treated it like any project I'd ever led, only this time the client was me, and the deadline was ruthless. Step 1, collect the receipts. I dug into every draft I'd ever shared with Savannah, old email chains, auto-saved versions, even the annotated printouts I kept in my desk. I found timestamps that contradicted the narrative she'd spun, metadata proving my authorship, and notes where I'd sketched the campaign's core strategy weeks before she revealed it. Every file was copied, encrypted, and stored in 3 different places. No single server could swallow them now. Step 2, find witnesses. People talk. They always do. I started small, a coffee with Laura from graphics, a quiet lunch with Anton in analytics, listening more than speaking. Their stories lined up, offhand remarks Savannah had made about borrowing concepts, missed approvals, versions that disappeared. They were afraid of her at first, but when they saw the files I carried, fear turned to relief. One by one, they signed statements, simple notes typed on plain paper, ordinary and damning. Step 3, set the traps. Savannah thrived on performance and attention. Her ego was a stage light, bright, unforgiving. So I built a stage of my own, subtle, legal, and unavoidable. I prepared a side-by-side dossier, her presentation materials next to my drafts, highlighted changes, email chains with timestamps, and a log of instances where her name had been fraudulently attached to approvals. I copied everything to a secure drive and created an indexed file that even someone skimming it couldn't ignore. Step 4, create plausible deniability, then remove it. I passed anonymous tips to a freelance industry reporter who'd once asked tough questions about corporate ethics. I discreetly alerted HR to inconsistencies in project approvals and financial sign-offs. I talked to a compliance lawyer I trusted, just hypotheticals at first, who confirmed that what I'd gathered was not only unethical but potentially criminal. While Savannah went about her days unbothered, small leaks began to ripple through the firm, a whisper here, a cautious internal query there. She smiled through it all, convinced she was untouchable. Step 5, pick the moment. Timing was everything. I could have exposed her in a petty email or a bitter Slack post, but I wanted a collapse so complete it couldn't be rewritten. The company's holiday gala, where executives, clients, and investors gathered under one roof, lavish, televised, and perfect, was the stage I chose. It was where she planned to accept an industry award the following week. It was also where her sponsors would be seated, where cameras would hang on every word. Everyone thought the game was still hers. Savannah strutted through the office, luminous and invincible, her laughter echoing like a countdown. She had no idea the file labeled Madison, final proof, sat in my bag, and that Julia and Mark, two quiet allies who had suffered her sharp edges, were already waiting in the crowd. I closed the folder and felt the weight of it, months of humiliation now heavy with possibility. I rehearsed my lines in my head and went over contingencies like a general checking supply routes. Then, alone in the dark car outside the gala, I opened my laptop, found the final email, and hovered over the send button. My finger trembled. I hit send. The gala was a sea of crystal chandeliers and glittering gowns, the kind of night where reputations are polished until they shine. Savannah took the stage like a queen claiming her crown. Cameras trained on her. Investors leaned forward. The room held its breath. I sat 3 rows back, the dossier heavy in my lap, Julia and Mark at my sides. My chest felt like a drum. When Savannah began to speak, smooth, practiced, the room already eating from her palm, I signaled. Julia eased to the AV booth where she'd quietly coordinated with the tech staff earlier. Mark watched the exits. The plan was simple and surgical: let the lights expose what Savannah's smile had hidden. The first slide rolled up as expected: graphs, glossy mock-ups, polished lines. Applause cued. Then, without warning, the screen sliced in two. On the left, the version Savannah presented. On the right, my drafts, time-stamped, annotated, dated weeks earlier. The music faltered. Cameras swung. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. I stood. My voice, measured, low, cut the hum. Everything you're seeing here was mine, I said. Every insight, every chart, every promised metric. I clicked the remote. Audio played, a recording of Savannah boasting to a client about reworking another team's files, followed by an HR email she'd forged to cover her tracks. The room went cold. The reporter I'd tipped earlier stood, microphone poised. Questions came like gunfire. Is this true? Who authorized this? Savannah's face, once a lesson in composure, crumpled into a mask of panic. Her practiced answers fell apart as screen after screen delivered proof, altered approvals, copied emails, witnesses' statements. Phones buzzed. Hands covered mouths. The award on the stage gleamed absurdly in the light of her unraveling. Security stayed calm. Professionals know how to move when chaos is controlled. A compliance officer I'd quietly briefed stepped forward and announced an immediate suspension pending a full investigation. Investors whispered about clawbacks. Major clients asked to postpone contracts until audits cleared the air. Social feeds, already hungry for scandal, lit up with fragments of the dossier shared by the reporter. Savannah tried to speak, to charm the crowd one last time. Her words were brittle. Her supporters edged away. An executive I'd once thought untouchable rose and, with a face like stone, said, "We cannot represent or profit from the fraud." Sponsors pulled their pledges on the spot. Cameras captured every step as security escorted her off the stage, her heels clicking like a metronome counting the seconds of her fall. Outside, flashbulbs exploded. Lawyers surrounded her. The firm released a statement promising cooperation with investigators. Within hours, the industry feeds were alive with headline after headline: fabricated approvals, fraud allegations, director suspended. I felt something loosen inside me, first the tension, then the grief, then something like air returning to lungs that had been clenched for years. Applause rose, awkward and then genuine, not for a stolen idea but for truth being set right. People looked at me, really looked, and for the first time, I saw not pity but respect. She had pushed me out because they believed I didn't belong. Tonight, the world learned the truth. I closed my eyes for a second and let the sound wash over me, the hum of cameras, the murmur of a crowd that had finally woken up. When I opened them, I stepped forward into a light that felt earned, not stolen. The morning after the gala, the city woke up to Savannah's downfall splashed across every business feed and trending hashtag. Headlines screamed of fraud, stolen work, and the Queen of Whitmore's glittering empire brought to her knees. Her accounts were frozen pending investigation. Clients pulled their contracts. The award she was set to receive was rescinded before it even left its velvet case. And me? For the first time in years, I walked into the office without shrinking. Colleagues who once ignored me now stopped at my desk to offer quiet words of apology, respect, even admiration. Some confessed they'd suspected Savannah but hadn't dared to act. I wasn't just the girl who survived, I was the one who stood up, who exposed the truth. The CEO called me into his office. His tone was careful, a mixture of guilt and relief. "Madison," he said, "we failed to see you. But we can't afford to make that mistake again. I want you leading the next campaign, your campaign." The offer should have felt like victory, but what settled in my chest wasn't pride so much as clarity. Savannah had tried to erase me, but in doing so, she had forced me to see my own strength. I didn't need their validation to prove I belonged anymore. I had built my own proof, in front of the world. Weeks passed. Savannah's trial date was set. Fraud, embezzlement, breach of contract, the list grew longer with each discovery. Rumors whispered that she'd lost her house, her car, her circle of admirers. The queen of the firm had become a cautionary tale. One night, I walked past the cafe where I once overheard her laughing at me. The same table sat empty, its glassy window reflecting only me this time, no shadows, no ghosts. It struck me then, I hadn't just survived her betrayal. I had risen above it. She tried to destroy me, to convince the world I didn't belong. Now, she lived in my shadow, a footnote in the story of my rise. Poetic justice doesn't always arrive with fire and fury. Sometimes, it comes in the quiet realization that you've won simply by refusing to be erased. And to anyone watching this who has felt that same sting of betrayal, by a friend, a coworker, or even family, I'll ask you this: what would you do if someone tried to destroy you? Would you fade into the background, or would you rise higher than they ever imagined? Tell me in the comments. Share your story, I want to hear it. And if you felt that surge of satisfaction seeing Savannah's empire crumble, hit subscribe. Because there are more stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice waiting to be told. After all, sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply becoming everything they said you could never be.